Welcome back to the show, everyone. Craig and Jonah here. So, little housekeeping matters here, and then I got some big news
All right.
I'm gonna drop on Jonah. So, a couple things. So we've had a lot of new subscribers recently, and I don't. I sometimes I assume people know things that they don't necessarily know. So depending on where you consume this, our primary channel is the YouTube channel. That's where we're getting the most growth at, and we will continue to put out content on YouTube. But we also have just the audio side, Spotify, Apple, all those kinds of things. Um, for people that maybe want to listen to us when you're in the car, or at the gym, or on your way to confession or something like that. You could pop us in. Just find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, those things. So, in case people weren't aware of that option, wanted to highlight that, and vice versa. If you didn't know we were on YouTube, if you want to be able to look at my ugly face, you can hop on over on YouTube and see that.
And imagine mine.
Yeah, yep. And every so often he'll stick a finger in the screen so you can start to do your forensic analysis. Um, so a couple things coming up. We're close to launching a mastermind, which is going to be once a month, maybe twice a month, just because some people can only do early in the morning, and some people can only do later. So I'm thinking we'll do like one Thursday morning a month, and maybe we'll do like a Sunday evening or something like that. More of a closed session for guys or ladies, I guess, to get in and maybe talk about more detailed, specific things that maybe aren't even suitable for you and I to talk about on the show. So I wanted to remind people of that. Watch for those details, and we'll let you know how to get into that if you want to. Um, I'm not I think this episode will come out before episode what is it? 186. Thomas Palega. We interviewed Thomas this weekend. I found Thomas over on Catholic Twitter, and the best word I can use to describe Thomas is a Catholic instigator. I like that because I'm kind of an instigator myself, but maybe not to the same degree. We had a really, really good conversation with him, and I think we're going to have that come out either this coming Sunday or maybe the next Sunday evening at our regular scheduled time, and we may premiere it so that he'll be available to comment, and that I'll be there, and maybe Jonah will be there as well. So stay tuned for that. Um, we have the episode 200 is sort of approaching. It's really crazy how quickly it comes up. I remember we were all excited at episode 100. And in actuality, the topic that we were going to do on episode 100, we kind of didn't because of a confluence of circumstances. But I think episode 200 is going to be the time, and we're going to really confront this topic of other acts, other Catholic acts. If you've been following this show for a while, you know what we're talking about. If not, I'm actually going to play a clip here in a little bit. The reason why I'm telling you now is this. In my opinion, this could be the most critical moral issue for married Catholics, in terms of those that are especially those that are using NFP and having to abstain and all that kind of stuff. To me, this is a critical issue that determines the level of difficulty of this lifestyle.
In our previous segment, we did something, was the Uncharted Catholic News, but one thing that blew my mind was the percentage of Catholics that use NFP. I couldn't believe it was only 4%. I didn't know I was in such a minority.
Well, it is kind of amazing because you think of the amount of anguish that we put ourselves through trying to comply and realize we're in a small minority to start with.
Extremely small. I had no idea. I thought for sure it was like 30%. I don't know. That would have been my guess.
Yeah,
And
and
maybe that's based on the parish that we go to, and there's a lot of large families, and so you're kind of skewed based on that. But
I forget, was that self-identifying Catholics or actual
oh,
practicing
I can't
Catholics?
remember. I think it was a study by Notre Dame.
I believe that when we interviewed Thomas, and if you watch his episode, I think he says this. I think he actually said that same figure of actual regular Catholic mass attendance. So not even just so if you expand the population to anyone that considers themselves Catholic and maybe goes to mass irregularly, Christmas and Easter,
Easter.
that 4% is even smaller,
Yeah,
and much smaller.
that's true.
Um, and well, I have some theories as to why that is, why so few people do it, which is actually kind of one of the reasons why we have this show, because we recognize some of the difficulties, and also I think maybe some of the just bad communication or bad information out there, potentially bad information. Um, and yeah, so stay tuned for episode 200. Other acts. If you have questions that you would like us to take up, send those to us. Leave a comment below. Go up to the link tree and email us. If you have suggestions on guests, I have a few feelers out for potential guests that we could interview either at that time or as part of that. Hopefully they don't spend too much time looking around the channel and politely
Go
decline.
bail.
Yeah. We're in that we've had some pretty good guests in the past, but I think we were unknown enough at that point in time. They didn't know what they
Yeah.
were, but we will treat people with respect, and we have genuine curiosity about this issue. So stay tuned for that. Actually, we got some I think I forwarded these on to you. I got some very, very lengthy emails from a listener from New Zealand, I believe,
Hmm?
which is cool.
Yeah.
Sounds cool. Um, who has done, and I think she's not even maybe recently Catholic, not married, but has just a profound, even a more profound interest in this stuff than you and I do.
Hard to believe.
Hard to believe. And I invited her on the show. So far, she's declined. I think mostly logistic reasons, but we can make that work, even if you and I have to come here in the middle of the night.
I thought you were going to say that's the big news.
Nope.
Well, I would have been pretty excited for that too.
Get ready.
All right.
So anyway, that was really, and we're going to use some of that stuff. And not to sound too conspiratorial, but we have gotten stuff that we were sworn to secrecy, not necessarily content,
It's true though.
but the source of information was
It's almost like the X-Files, where like an envelope just shows up on Mulder's desk.
more or less,
That's basically what it was.
and it has to do with this other X issue. So we're excited. Maybe we shouldn't be excited. Maybe we should be scared. But we're gonna take this on in episode 200 in very authentic Uncharted Catholic Man fashion.
All right.
So stay tuned for that. All right. Don't be looking at the board over there.
Okay. I'm
All
not
right.
looking.
So I asked Jonah today, this morning, I said, what are you doing at 4 o'clock today? He's like, yeah, I'm working around. I said, well, so I am scheduled to talk to the happy housewife or happy wife. Yeah.
What?
The happy wife school or
How did
whatever.
you set that up?
So I went out to I went to try and find her contact information to see if we could get her on the show or get some feedback. And I went onto her website and booked a calendar call with her. And I said right away, here's what I'm doing. I apologize. I didn't see an email address, but I'd really like to talk. We love your content and we love to talk to you about maybe coming on the show. She hasn't told me not to come on yet. So I'm scheduled to get on with her at 4 o'clock. I'm hoping it'll be just kind of a introductory call and maybe we can set something up. But if she wants to say, okay, we could talk for 30 minutes, I'm going to be ready to rock and roll and record.
All right.
So
Well, that's awesome.
keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's great.
that would be awesome. Huh?
Yeah.
You don't know unless you ask. Like, I think I'm sure there's people out there thinking, man, I would love to get on the show, but these guys are just so famous and popular now. We can make time for you.
Yep. We can make time for anybody.
Yeah, we the paparazzi doesn't chase us around too much.
Yeah.
So, but you know, people are accessible. That's how I got talked to Adam Lane Smith a while ago, and
Yeah.
the Longenecker. You
Yeah.
just never know. Maybe
Hmm.
we'll send out an invite to the Pope Francis. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Have him break down Onan.
Yeah. Gosh, alrighty.
Well, it'd be interesting to know his thoughts.
I'm sure there would be.
I'm sure he's got thoughts.
But he does. He may actually share them.
He might.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For better or for worse, he may share his thoughts.
That's true. Well, that's exciting news.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I hope it doesn't turn out to be a big letdown, but I checked my email this morning and I'm still on her calendar and I got the reminder yesterday. So fingers crossed, if we could get her on, that would be really cool.
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
So anyway,
check out our YouTube page, Happy Wife School.
Yeah, she's not an old account, but she's just blowing up.
Yep.
And
this is truthful.
It's truthful, and I know one of our one of the people that has commented said basically is I love her content, but I'm scared to share it with my wife, and I think that's
pretty much the sentiment, I think.
Yeah. And I'm sure she gets that all the time, but I'd like to see, maybe we could do a video with her.
Yeah.
And get her on, or maybe I can get my wife to do a video talking about it. I don't know, something to grease the skids a little bit for communication.
Yeah. Because her message is important.
Yeah.
Even if it's only partially true, it's important. I mean,
I think it
seems valid from my experience.
Yeah.
But
I think it is certainly worthy of consideration and discussion.
Definitely.
So stay tuned for that. Hopefully I didn't get us all excited for nothing, but
wouldn't be the first time.
It wouldn't be won't be the last for sure. Won't be the last for sure.
Yeah.
So since we have a few minutes left, I do want to I do want to tease out and cue us up for episode 200 on this other Acts progress. And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to play a short clip, well, not short, few minute long, of our dear other podcasting friend. And she had on Dr. Sarah Bartel, who's a Catholic moral theologian, married. And I actually sent her a message to see if we could get her on. She has not responded yet. But I wanted to play part of this. We can maybe comment a little bit, but really to kind of set the stage for what Jonah and I want to talk about on episode 200. So just listen up here.
Question is it okay when we're avoiding pregnancy and we're during a time of abstinence, is it okay to bring the woman to orgasm without bringing the man to orgasm?
Right. And so, I mean, and outside of full intercourse, right?
Exactly. Outside of full intercourse.
Okay. So we're talking about stimulating her, whether it's manually, orally, in a way it's pleasurable for her, all the way to the point of orgasm. And so,
or at all.
No,
right.
I'm just going to say clearly, right from the start, it's not. And the reason is, so we know that's not
If you didn't catch that, she said it's not okay, is what she said. Now she's going to go on and explain why she thinks that's true.
Creative, right? First of all,
right. We can check that one off.
Right. And neither is it truly unitive, because it is her, first of all, by it not being procreative, you've separated the procreative and unitive aspects of sexuality, which are, as Humani Vitae says, intrinsically integrated. They are meant to go together. So here we are just using the pleasurable aspect of.
I would say there's some unity there. That's the part where I struggle with that. It's that there's some unity. It's not like she's by herself.
Well, it's a
shared experience.
It's interesting because I don't remember,
which is important for bonding.
Yeah. Well, and I was on, I think it was a Catholic Answers thing or something recently on the same issue, and it was the same topic and same kind of explanation. And I can't remember if she goes back into it here, or not. But she says, well, first of all, she says it separates the unitive from the procreative. But then she says it's not even really unitive. And so I'm like, well, is it unitive or not? Like, if it's not unitive, how are you separating the unitive from procreative? It's almost like you haven't even combined the two things that make the glue, or you haven't combined the water with the cement to make the concrete. Like, they kind of want to have it both ways.
I feel like there's unity in some, at least some,
Yeah,
amount there.
yeah, yeah. But and I
So that's just, and maybe, you don't always say things right in the moment.
yeah, but any person I've heard talk about this always likes to say, by the way, it's not unitive either. Well, okay. Well,
Well, it's not solo either.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So maybe we'll play just a little bit more here,
Right.
but I think this is the topic that I really want people to be thinking about, praying about, sending, either send us some feedback in advance, questions you'd like to have, if there's articles out there, good clips you think would be worthy of us discussing, or if you want to come on for the premiere. But this is the topic we're going to be addressing head on.
Sexuality outside of the purpose of procreation. And sex is not just for making babies, it is also for bonding the couple. But in this case, it's really doing neither, except possibly, as you were saying, some people could make the argument that it's pleasurable as well for the man to give the pleasure to the woman and bring her to orgasm. But what it's really the act of bringing her to climax is it's separating that from a bodily union of the two, and I guess it'd just be more of like a mental pleasure for him. Anyway, yes, I'm gonna
because
draw a clear line and say that is not.
Here we're gonna go ahead and start reacting to it, but that I think is so we talk about unitive and procreative, and then they always bring up this issue of pleasure, which
The secondary, I think.
they spend a lot more time worrying about the pleasure component than I do. Not that it's not pleasurable, but that's not really the driving factor, I think, a lot of the time.
Yep.
But what's interesting is that they kind of, so it's interesting that they're critical of a situation where a husband might bring his wife to orgasm without experiencing orgasm himself. Like, well, first of all, why can't a man do that? Like that, why can't it be okay for a husband to want something good for his wife, even if he doesn't get
I mean, it at that point, it's not much different than a back rub.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, I know,
right.
But I don't know. And this is the stuff that I really wrestle with as far as what is okay and what isn't. And
what I find fascinating about the whole the Catholic atmosphere out there that addresses this issue is that the language they use and the emphasis they take is different than I would. And I would also say that my impression is that those that confront this issue tend to be women out there. Christopher West notwithstanding, but I kind of put him in his own little camp there.
In his own category.
And I see the differences between men and women reflected in their reactions or opinions on this topic that I would have as a
non-theologian.
Yeah. It's someone with just basic reason and common sense. So I'm gonna play a few more minutes.
An acceptable, use of our sexuality.
Right. And I think something important to think about when you're thinking about that question of, is this respecting the unitive aspect, is that there's two parts to that question. There is the objective uniting of bodies. And so this is why things like IVF are not okay. Unitive has that of the two bodies to come together. But then there is also a subjective unity that happens in, head and heart when the bodies unite objectively. And so, so what Sarah is saying is that act, while it may be in some way head and heart unifying because of the pleasure and enjoyment and things like that, it is not bodily unified. Now, let's take that to the next.
There's probably some touching going on.
Well,
unless like they're a Jedi, maybe.
Well, but I think it's interesting that she says that when she is also a very, very strong advocate, which I support, of women being able to have orgasm before or after intercourse, but separated from it.
It's a fair point as well.
I mean, I just see conflict.
Well, there's too much legalism.
Yeah. And I think that's the one point I really want to emphasize here. Is I'm not saying that stuff isn't valid and isn't necessary and is even wrong necessarily. But there is a disconnect between that kind of stuff, that legalism, and I think the lived experience, and that's kind of gets back to, if there's one thing that we like to say about ourselves is we're authentic.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the real experience. And what she is saying there differs greatly, I think, from most of our own personal experiences. And it sort of reminds me of what we will be talking about if that episode comes out after this one, the one with Thomas Pelega. But what do we do with the fact that, let's say, like the quote you get, figure you had, what is it? 4%?
4% of Catholics. So I just did the math. So that affects maybe 2 million people in the US, which is larger than I also.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like 76 million Catholics and
I mean
60 and 70 million.
I mean, the vast majority of Catholics are not using natural family planning in the first place.
So they're not too worried about this stuff.
Yeah. But even within the natural family planning community, I don't think there's very many that can regularly and perfectly follow all the tittles of the law.
Yeah, I would like to know that, I guess.
I see a lot of
and if it was self-reported, you couldn't really trust that.
Yeah. I see a lot of good Catholic NFP using people in the confession lines, and I'm not saying this is the only reason they're there, but
good chance it's part of it.
Yeah.
And going to confession is great. So you can't fault them for that.
Yeah. Again, this is not to say that the points they're making are wrong necessarily, but I think it requires us to at least examine why the actual experience of so many people is different from the quote unquote black letter law, or the objective and subjective and all that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know.
And that brings up a point that Thomas Pelega made, which will be coming up, just about how Jesus said that his yoke is easy. And man, like that was a really good point, and something that I really wrestled with, because this part of being Catholic is extremely difficult.
Well, yeah, I mean,
and so do you think, like, when Jesus was teaching the guys, he's like, don't be touching yourself, you only do it this one way, good luck to you, or like, do you think that the message of Jesus when he was talking to people that were considered sinners by the time was, come to me, and just repent and say you're sorry and you'll have eternal life, and live your life properly, the best you can, in the best way you can, without being scrupulous, because the scrupulosity that comes from these teachings is worse than probably other things that make you scrupulous. I don't know.
Well,
like, because the church teaching is that you do it this way, and if you fall short of it, you're in real trouble.
Yeah, I mean, my impression, and maybe this is just based on a Hallmark version of Jesus, is that he was far wasn't the legalism he wasn't the legalistic type. He was specifically kind of in conflict with the Pharisees,
Who were the legalistic type?
and Thomas makes, I think, a pretty compelling argument that some of the more traditionalist slash conservative voices in the church bear a lot of resemblance to the Pharisees of old, and I can't say
Can't
that
say
he's
he's
wrong.
totally wrong. Yeah, I just don't think that the good news, what they were supposed to go out and preach was follow this way the best you can, and if you're really lucky, you just might make it. Like,
Yeah,
I just don't see that as being the gospel.
yeah,
But that is kind of how it's portrayed today.
yeah.
Like you have to follow this massive rule book, and if you're lucky, if you die under the right situation, you'll make it.
One of my friends on Facebook, who's a traditionalist for sure, posted some tradition. I'm sure he was a traditionalist of some sort, priest, offering a critique or criticism of the Pope's letter or guidelines on blessings for irregular relationships. And I just comment, I said, is this just out of curiosity, is he also in the camp that thinks about less than 10% of Catholics are going to make it to heaven or whatever?
Yeah.
And he's like, well, Craig, what do you think is the number of people going to heaven? And I didn't respond to him, but if forced to choose, to me, universalism, which means that ultimately no one's going to be in hell, seems more plausible to me and consistent with that idea of a loving God than the other extreme, that a very small percentage of people are going to get to heaven and the vast majority of human population over time is going to be burning for eternity in hell. I mean, that if I'm forced to choose, I'd say I'm closer on the universalism side of things.
Yeah.
Just otherwise, I really struggle to make sense of our faith and our notion of God if the more pessimistic approach is more accurate.
So then, I agree with you as well. But then I read, like, I think it's Matthew 25, where he says, but then, on the last day or whatever, people cry out to me and I'll say, I never knew you. So that also, like, that's a tough, that's quote, that's in the red letters right there.
Well, there's red meat for everybody in the scripture somewhere, it feels like, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there is, I don't know. So that's just go to confession and just trust in God. That's all you can do. So I've been reading a lot of near-death experiences lately.
Oh, yeah, I know
And
you said it. I apologize.
no, I read a lot of them. And one thing that's interesting is that people who end up in hell, a lot of times when they cry out to God or cry out to Jesus, they're lifted out.
Hmm.
And so it makes you wonder if there isn't an element of despair as far as people that are held there, like, and if they would cry out. I don't know, because then in the Bible it says there's a great chasm between the two and you can't be taken from one area to the next. I don't know. But it's just interesting that in near-death experiences, at least, and most people experience mostly a pleasant scenario where they feel love and that sort of thing. But there is a small percentage that experiences hell-like conditions. But at least in those near-death experiences, they are typically saved by the hand of God, it seems like.
My wife and we were having this kind of a theological discussion here maybe a few weeks ago on the couch. And so I had been to mass maybe that night. Um and a couple that I know, my parents' age, or a little younger than my parents, came up to me and said, would you please pray for my husband's brother? He's on his deathbed basically, and he's been away from the church for most of his adult life. Pray for a deathbed conversion that happened to one of his other brothers, and this and that. And I was talking to my wife about that, and I said, I struggle to understand how one person, like, God is willing to deliver one person from eternal suffering because they were fortunate enough to have someone else pray for them or whatever,
Hmm.
or God said, yeah, someone prayed for your deathbed conversion, so I'm going to give it to you. But no one prayed for your deathbed conversion, so you're gonna spend eternity in hell. As a person, I struggle to make sense of that.
And I think you just have to trust in a merciful God, because God is merciful. And you look at the good thief, he was the most publicized deathbed conversion
Yeah.
probably. And
Mhm.
Jesus told him he'd be in paradise. So, I mean, it's that's the stuff where, it's good to wrestle with that. And it's easy to see the traditional point of view at times. But it's not always, I don't know. It's a struggle.
Well, I think the challenge is that for those that are, let's say, unwittingly pharisaical in nature, it's difficult, number one, to realize you're in that space, and number two, it's difficult to um, talk to those people or change their minds because they more or less have the letter of the law on their side, but what they're missing is the spirit of the law, I think.
Hmm.
And so, when you're someone that has the quote unquote truth on my side, it can create a sense of, I don't know, entitlement is the right word, but
Superiority,
yeah, like, okay, well,
like the Pharisees. I
yeah,
mean, they were living according to the letter of the law.
yeah. And so it's harder to argue or criticize someone who's technically correct
Hmm.
as opposed to just preaching something that's clearly heretical or something like
Hmm.
we do. Right?
We just ask questions. We don't preach heresy.
Right. But it's really hard to I'd say argue with someone who can point to facts or scripture references or church doctrine or this
Hmm.
saint's writings and explain to them how they're missing the boat here.
Hmm.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. And that goes back to the question of whether or not we're supposed to just suffer through life, and the suffering is what gets us salvation eventually, or if you're supposed to live happily and attract people to the faith. Like, I think those two things are kind of somewhat exclusive.
Yeah, and I still struggle with that because when things have been really, really good. And I think those of us that are or once were traditional Catholics, we become worried and skeptical when things are going well because we associate suffering with our faith.
Yeah. And I don't know. I don't know what's right.
So I don't know.
Other than trusting in God's mercy, that's all you can do.
Yeah, yeah. So I think if everyone put just more emphasis and confidence on God's mercy and just a little less
On the letter of the law.
on the letter of the law.
Because people's circumstances definitely create, areas where it isn't black and white necessarily.
Mhm,
And that isn't taken into account. It's difficult to take that into account,
mhm.
but it's easy to judge people when you don't understand their circumstances either.
Yeah. That's one thing my wife really tells our kids a lot is, when you see someone doing something that's, let's say, quote unquote, objectively wrong, reminding them that you don't know their heart, you don't know their circumstances, you don't know how much knowledge and consent they have for it to be a mortal sin.
Hmm.
Kind of going back to the person that jumps out of the top of a burning building scenario, like, and I'm sure the traditionalists would accuse us of being too
Soft.
lax, soft, or whatever. Maybe we are. I don't know. I'm just kind of telling how I feel than how I think about things.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
anyway, so that's the issue. I think that is the critical issue. And the other issue, not to we want to wrap things up, but the other issue that I think is deserving of another further discussion is something that Thomas and we talked about, is how many Catholics lose the faith, so to speak, in their teenage years. And one of the, at least he says, and I suspect this could be true, one of the major factors that causes young people to lose the faith is when they start struggling with things like masturbation and porn and can't overcome it, can become despairing or whatever, and lose the faith. I kind of had those
Mhm.
sort of spiritual struggles much later in life, but I can relate to that. And so I think one of the things that would be worthy of consideration is, how do we talk to our young people?
Yeah.
How do we do our best to get them through that difficult transition in life?
Until you're married and you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah. Just get to your wedding day, boys, and you'll never have to think about this stuff again.
Yeah, right. If you're thinking about being a priest, consider it more, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, well, stay tuned for that. I think these are really, really important issues, and I suspect these are the kinds of things that are attracting people to this channel. And we welcome comments, emails, whatever,
Positive or negative.
or negative. Yep. The algorithm doesn't care one way or another. Nor do we. So anyway, well, that was good. So stay tuned, everyone. Thank you, Jonah, for that.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone, and until next time, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good one.